Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a man who travelled to one of the most protected and mysterious places in the world to embark on a secret mission. A mission that had horrific consequences. Keep watching because you will not believe the ending to today's story. But before we get started, my name is Raphael. I am the true crime lawyer. On this channel, we unravel dark mysteries, we explore true crime, and we delve into the bizarre, the wacky, and the unexplained. If this piques your curiosity, I want you to summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your full support. Please also press subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. So, are you ready? Court is now in session. In the heart of Oklahoma, a young John Allen Chow grew up with tales of explorers and Christian missionaries. To many, this may seem like an odd combination, but John was raised in a very devout Christian family, and this played a significant role in shaping his beliefs and aspirations. And so, John's childhood was filled with adventures, both real and imaginary. For example, when John was young, he would often close his eyes and imagine his backyard transforming into the dense jungles of Africa or the towering peaks of the Himalayas. His mother often found him with a makeshift tent, pretending to be a missionary in a far-off land, preaching to his audience of stuffed animals. As he got older, he started attending Sunday school, where he heard stories of missionaries like David Livingstone and Jim Elliot, which inspired him even more. He would even regularly stand on a makeshift pulpit and preach to his family after dinner, speaking with the passion and confidence of a grown adult man. His parents' reaction to all of this, well, they were incredibly proud. You see, John's parents were devout Christians. His father was a Chinese-American psychiatrist who left China during the Cultural Revolution. And for those of you who don't know, the Cultural Revolution was a socio-political period in China during which religious groups were persecuted and forced to adopt atheistic communist ideologies. His mother, on the other hand, was an American of European descent and was an organizer for Chi Alpha, which is a Christian social club. So when John's parents saw such a religious spark in their child, they were not only incredibly proud, but they also recognized their moral duty to nurture it, believing that God had a very special plan for their son. As John grew older, his passion for exploration and evangelism only intensified. He joined the church's youth group and later All Nations, a Missouri-based missionary organization. There he led missions, first to nearby towns and later across the globe, spreading the word of God, and he was very successful. His charisma and genuine belief drew people to him, and many people credited John for reigniting their faith. And in return, John's faith grew and grew. But he also did something else. Closing the bathroom door of his two-bedroom apartment and making sure that the door was locked, John stared intently into the mirror. Every person that John had met considered him to be warm and friendly, empathetic, and driven by a desire to help others. Most importantly, they saw John as an open book. But John had a secret. This secret had been hidden away from everyone his entire life, including his parents, his friends, and his church. This secret was predicated on John's ability to harness his special skill, which allowed him to draw people in and capture their minds. For every person that John was able to convert to his belief, John grew more and more confident that his secret plan was going to work. As he closed his eyes and opened them once more, he realized that now it was time. It was time to execute his final mission. John's mission was simple. At least in theory. It would first require him to travel a very long distance to a far and destitute place, and then once he reached this place, he would meet a very important and influential person that no one has ever been able to talk to. And by doing so, John would give to this person, this man, a gift. A gift that John would hope would change the course of history forever. The problem was that this place was heavily protected and guarded by the government, and the government vowed to ensure that no one could ever step foot in this place or talk to the very person that John so desperately needed to meet. This would mean that John would have to covertly sneak into this place without anyone knowing. But you see, John was prepared, because the other secret that John had, that he had expert training in linguistics, in survival, and he had a very deep understanding of the history and landscape of the place he was trying to enter. So from his perspective, he was confident that he could pull off the one thing that no one has ever been able to do in the history of mankind. So, on the morning of October 16, 2018, John boarded a plane from Cape Town in South Africa and headed to Port Blair, the capital city of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is a union territory of India in the Bay of Bengal. Once there, John had a sense of nervousness, but this was coupled with excitement. You see, Port Blair would be the base of his mission operations, but it wasn't where he needed to go. The place that his mission centered around was actually on an island, and it is how the government was able to stop people from entering this place, because this island was completely isolated from the mainland and any human population. And, as an extra layer of security, the Navy routinely patrolled the surrounding waters to infiltrate any boats and persons trying to step foot on the island. And so this was John's first hurdle. How does he get to the island without anyone knowing? So he's standing there and he's thinking out loud. Maybe he could hire a boat, but that would be difficult because not only would he have to try to stay clear of any Navy patrol boats, but he would have to navigate the waters. And the thing is, whilst he was trained, any boat captain, nay, any person who's ever been on a boat, knows that reading a nautical chart is only half the challenge when you're boating. You really need to have a personal familiarity with the water passage, especially when for John, he was also trying to be covert. So he scratched that idea, and then he thought, maybe I can hire someone to take me there. Now, this was a good idea, but again, this was a covert mission. So he couldn't just hire any boat, he would actually have to have and hire a boat that had real good intention to be out in those waters. And then he hit him. A fishing boat. A fishing boat being out in those waters made sense. I mean, you tend to fish where the fish are, and most of the time, good fishing locations are in more remote parts of the sea, or at least away from populated areas. So this was a pretty good plan. Of course, being a protected location, the island also had a zone of protected water. This means that you can't physically be within a certain radius of the island, even though you're technically not physically on the island itself. But John thought at least a fishing boat could be a reasonable alibi. That is, John could make up a story that he was fishing on the boat and then somehow the boat drifted to the protected waters and he didn't realize, and it was that he was sorry and that he would just turn around. So that is exactly what he did. After a few weeks of planning, on November the 14th, John paid 2 fishermen to take him to the island. Clutching a small bag containing the special gift, John stepped onto the boat and began the 50-kilometer trip to the island in pitch darkness, illuminated only by glowing plankton, which John described as being fish-like, jumping around like darting mermaids. As the boat's motor flared through the water, John had a massive adrenaline rush. His whole life was preparing for one thing, and this was it. So with that, the boat's continuing almost in a direct line to this island. And John's constantly looking back, because they're getting very close to this island now and they have not seen a Navy boat yet. And John, he's in two minds about this. One, maybe they have luck on their side, and this was a sign that they had to complete this mission. But it also might be the opposite, because what John was about to do was incredibly dangerous. And for a fleeting second, John was hoping that someone would physically stop him, because then he would be forced to abandon his mission and he would be able to go home. And this is because John knew that once he took one step onto this island, it would be too late. and he could never return to the life that he once had. So, as John is thinking about this, he shakes his head one more time, and with that he gets clarity. He knew that he would get impure thoughts. In fact, his training specifically accounted for the fact that once he was near the island, he would start feeling a sensational rush of doubt and an internal voice telling him to turn back. This was the first test. John knew what he had to do. It was to keep going forward. And that is what he did. So by now, the fishing boat is within eye distance of the island, and suddenly it stops. John looks around, and the boat captain gives him a sign, and John immediately springs into action. With the help of the other fishermen, he lifts a large wooden object and throws it into the water, and then clutching his gift, he jumps onto that wooden object and he starts rowing. That wooden object was a canoe, and what John was planning to do was row the rest of the way to the island, because whilst the fishermen were happy to take John to the island, there was no price that they were willing to accept to actually step foot on the island themselves. So John was on his own. So John is rowing and heading to this island, and the island itself is actually incredibly beautiful. The sand is white, the water is blue, and there are these green, lush forests all around. And had it not been for the fact that this island was incredibly dangerous and John was putting himself in mortal danger, it could have been seen as an island paradise. But it wasn't. And John knew this, because his eyes weren't fixated on the beauty of the island, but on one particular part. A part where there was white smoke drifting through the air. He knew that is where he needed to go. And so, he directs his canoe towards the smoke, and he finally makes it to the shore. And he notices that not only is there no one there, it's also completely barren. There's no buildings, there's no outposts, there's no fences, there's nothing. But most eerie of all is that it was completely silent. It was almost like John had these noise-cancelling headphones on, because he didn't hear anything at all. So he's staring intently into the green forest, because he knows that there has to be someone on the island. It couldn't just be abandoned. So he takes a step forward onto the sand, and then all of a sudden he hears this whoosh sound, and then he hears another whoosh, and he's looking around thinking, what the heck was that? And then he looks to the right and sees a wooden arrow embedded in the sand. The whoosh sound was arrows that were flying towards him from the green forest, and they weren't stopping. So John, he recognizes the danger he's in, and he makes a dash for it, back to his canoe. And whilst he's running, all these arrows are continuing to come at him, but for some reason they're missing his body. And this gives him enough space and time to push his canoe out to the water and row back from the island to the awaiting fisherman's boat. As John hurriedly jumps to the boat, he looks at the fishermen and they look at him, but it isn't shock that they're expressing. It was a look of despair. Because what they were looking at wasn't John, but the package that John was holding so intently in his arms. It was a gift that John had planned to give them. This gift had an arrow that went right through it. As John sat on his bed in his shack in Port Blair, his hands were shaking, but his mind was very clear. After all, if first you don't succeed, you try and try again. And that is exactly what John did. The next day, John would again hire the same fisherman to take him to the island, and once again, he was met with hostility. But this time, he could barely get off the boat before he once again had to retreat. John once again found himself sitting on his bed, twice defeated. But John, he isn't anxious anymore. He's actually a little frustrated. You see, all this time he thought the real challenge was him trying to come to grips with this mission. It was almost like a cathartic experience for him. It was like the Matrix. You either take the red pill or you take the blue pill. But now he realizes that there's more to it than him just making an arbitrary choice about taking on this mission or not. He actually has to work for it. And then he realizes what he has to do. John realized that the reason he was not successful the first 2 times was because he was scared. Due to his fear, he wasn't fully committed in carrying out the mission. Because if he was, he would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. And that is what he did. On November 17, John would make his final visit to the island. The island that was home to his dreams and aspirations ever since he was a kid. With the cool breeze gently caressing his skin, he turned to look back at the fishermen, who, despite the severe risk, were willing to assist John. But now John had to continue this journey alone. Instructing the fishermen to abandon him, they dropped him off near the shore and watched as John slowly maneuvered his canoe to the island. That would be the last time they or anyone else would see John alive. You see, what John was trying to do was not sneak onto a secret military base or find some hidden treasure or even uncover a huge government conspiracy. No. What John was trying to do was make contact with a very ancient group of people who trace back thousands of years. These people are called the Sentinelese. And this is an indigenous tribe that has been and continues to be completely isolated from the Western world. This tribe lives on a tiny island on the Bay of Bengal in the northeastern Indian Ocean. This was the very same island that John had been so mesmerized with for all these years. North Sentinel Island. This island is one of the few places in the world that has been completely untouched by Western civilization. To the Sentinelese people, who call this island home, we are literal aliens. And therefore, perhaps rightfully so, anytime any person has gone near the island, the Sentinelese have aggressively defended their tribe and their land. And because of this, we virtually have no understanding of the Sentinelese culture, language, or lifestyle. And to the credit of Western society, in 1956, the Indian government, which controls and owns North Sentinel Island, they enacted strong laws to prohibit travel to the island and to be within 5 nautical miles of the island. And that's not just to allow the Sentinelese to live peacefully without harm and interference, but also to protect them from mainland infectious diseases, as it's pretty unlikely that the Sentinelese have any acquired immunity. The reason why John was so desperate to reach North Sentinel Island and to meet the Sentinelese was because John wanted to bring the word of God to them and save them. John was a missionary, and that was his life's purpose. And the secret gift that John was going to bring them was the Bible. Because of the hostility of the Sentinelese people, John's body was never recovered. John's parents would later go on to say that John loved God, helping those in need, and had nothing but love for the Sentinelese people. They also said that they forgave those who were responsible for their son's death. As of August 2024, there have been no reported or documented attempts to visit North Sentinel Island. So there you go, everyone. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's story. And also, what do you think about North Sentinel Island? Do you think it was right for John to visit, or do you think the North Sentinelese people should be left alone? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you haven't already done so, summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your support. Please also press subscribe and turn on all notifications so you can be part of the exclusive club who gets to see my videos as soon as they are uploaded. Also, my videos are available as podcasts on all major streaming platforms, and also I post podcast exclusive stories, so make sure you check them out, links down below. Finally, if you ever need to contact me or you want to share a story, you can do so on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, all under the username Raphael Parvin. I read all my DMs. So thank you so much for your time today, and I'll see you on the next case.